the Conservative peer, former Home Office Minister. Hello to you, Lord Kirkhope.
Hello, hi, John. Hi.
What are your thoughts on this operation where we're going to be sending police and police intelligence to try and aid in North Africa?
Well, I've been arguing, and I think a number of us have been arguing for a long time now, that this is exactly what we should be doing. Seeking out the people traffickers and dealing with them at source, rather than having a situation which we're having to handle with the stopping the boats on the channel, which is pretty appalling, really. And so I'm very pleased indeed that the government seems to be moving this direction. And also, on top of that, again, something I've always wanted to see, the government is now talking actively with other European Union members to see if we can't work in a joint fashion in some way to deal with the problem of migration and the movement of people looking for asylum, which is going to grow, I'm afraid, year on year.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to argue with the good sense of both of those parts of the plan. Tracing the roots of people smuggling to further back, more deeply into its roots to North Africa, and more cooperation among forces on the continent of Europe. But the problem, Lord Kirkhope, is just so vast. I mean, quite like the coastline of North Africa, which is used by the smugglers.
Well, exactly. I mean, the point is, when I was in the European Union, in the European Parliament, I was one of the drafters of the so-called Dublin agreements, which were agreements between EU member states to try and deal with the responsibilities and share them. Because at that time, even, there were thousands of people coming across the Mediterranean from North Africa in particular to Italy, to Greece, to Malta. And they were having to bear an enormous burden in terms of trying to deal with this issue. Thousands of people, I mean, we talk about our own issues in the Channel, but thousands of people have died in the Mediterranean in the last few years.
Yes.
And we've been getting something like, Italy has been suddenly taking about 1,000 people a day coming across, whether it's to the islands or whether it's directly to the mainland. And, this is a big, big issue. We never managed to solve it. I was sad to say that even the thing I drafted, the Dublin agreements, didn't work because ultimately individual nation states weren't always willing to take responsibility or to share it with others. And our leaving the European Union inevitably has meant that we're no longer part of the formal agreements in the European Union to deal with these issues.
Yeah.
That's why I have been opposed to Rwanda. I don't think it's a good idea because it means risking breaking an international agreement just at the time when we're trying to work on new agreements with our colleagues in Europe. So, this is a great and positive step, and I really welcome it. I just hope the government will abandon what is not a workable approach to asylum seekers and go for a better one.
And we're discussing attacking the problem at its root. That is the people smuggling gangs dealing in Africa before people set off across the Mediterranean and across the continent of Europe. What about the volume of people coming there? Because the numbers are going to go up over the course of the summer from North Africa and across the Channel. Is it a good idea for countries to cooperate, not just on law enforcement, but on dealing with the flows of migrants, and for this country to have more involvement with other European countries on that too?
As we used to do, yes. I mean, the trouble is we're not in the European Union, so we have to now seek bilateral agreements, or indeed agreements with the EU as a whole, as a third country. I mean, I think the problem here is this. As I said, I congratulate the government on taking this particular move, but you've got to remember something also, John, that these people smugglers aren't all in Africa. We have them in this country. Some of these criminals are based in the UK, and actually we need to be mopping them up a bit faster as well. And on top of that, we need to really deal with the question of asylum applications, acknowledge the fact that people are entitled to make an application, but as I hoped to do or tried to do when I was immigration minister in the 90s, to turn round these applications fast.
Yes.
It's very difficult to actually prove the two main areas of your right to become a refugee under the 51 Convention, the United Nations Convention. Very difficult. In my day, only about 10 or 15% of the people who applied were granted that refugee status. The rest we removed back from where they came. And we took a lot of flack doing that. The problem now appears to be also that we're just not processing these applications. We appear almost to be granting too many applications for refugee status, which I personally don't think are always meeting the criteria. And frankly, that is a mess. We've got to sort that out, but it's part of a wider operation. And I'm glad the government are at least taking on this other part of the operation, which they should have been doing, I think, a little earlier, and going nearer to the source of the problem and working with our partners over the channel.
Well, the rate of progress in dealing with the backlog of applications has been absolutely lamentable. But even if that is speeded up, is it going to be possible? Is it a reasonable ambition to persuade the people of Britain that if the system is managed more effectively, it will mean more migrants being granted asylum and being allowed to stay in this country? Because that's not the tone of the rhetoric at all at the moment.
No, but actually we won't. I mean, if we're doing it properly, John, probably less people will be granted asylum in this country. And if we're looking at figures, I mean, if you're talking about the overall migration figures, and people confuse this all the time, in immigration terms, that is, apart from the asylum applications, all the others who are coming here legally or indeed illegally to seek permanent citizen or residence, I should say, in this country, that's through the immigration rules, not asylum. That number has been growing out of all proportion, but that is entirely in the hands of government. We can decide how many people we want to come under immigration rules, what those rules are, and whether we want people in certain sectors, such as the health sector, whether we want to be a little more encouraging again to our European neighbours who used to provide very large numbers of people who worked in the health service under freedom of movement. Now, of course, they can't, and they've gone, a lot of them, home. Instead of going through the third world, trying to increase the number of people coming here from the third world, which creates its own problems, I would say, for future community relations and all the rest, we ought to now, I think, be looking again at the relationship with our nearest neighbours. I'm afraid there are people who won't agree with that because they voted for Brexit and we're out, as it were. But that doesn't stop us from working closely with those countries, both in order to deal with illegal immigrants and also to get the migration into this country that actually, I'm afraid, we really do need still.
OK. All right. Tim, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. That's Lord Kirkhope, the Conservative peer, former Home Office Minister.